It is my great privilege to introduce Sri tonight, but before I get to that, I want to point out that while we have a lot of Asian judges, we are yet to have an Asian president. And I saw a tall, good-looking guy up here with a beautiful family that just gave a great speech. He's in the wrong profession. The second thing I want to say is, John, Vincent, and Tina, I will stop complaining that you have not held a convention in the heartland, because you finally did it in the great city of Kansas City. And I bet when I started complaining back in Las Vegas about 7 years ago, you all would not have thought that 1,200 Asian lawyers would have showed up in the heartland. So thank you very much. Well, it really is an honor to introduce one of the greatest judges in America. Now, some of you may think he's only been on the bench a short while, so how can you say that? Well, if you want to look at his credentials, they're found at page 98 of your program, and I'm not going to tell you about that he's been a Supreme Court clerk, that he's argued in front of the Supreme Court 25 times, or that he went to a law school that beat Oregon this week. I knew Bill would clap. What I am going to tell you about, there's three qualities about Sri that make him an outstanding American and an outstanding judge. He is humble, he is understanding, and he's appreciative. If you walked up to him on the street and met him, you would not think he's one of the most powerful judges in America. You would think he's a nice-looking guy that has a heck of a basketball shot. But you would never find out in talking to him that he is on the D.C. Circuit. Rather, you would find out that he's from Lawrence, Kansas, and is a loyal Kansas Jayhawk fan. When President Obama talked about appointing people that are understanding and empathetic, he got someone in Sri. Not because he plays favorites, and not because he's unfair, but rather because he did grow up in the heartland. No offense to the coast, I know there's a lot of you here. But he grew up understanding what real America is about. And I don't want to criticize the coast. All I'm saying is he understands, growing up in Lawrence, Kansas, what people are about. Hardworking people. And he has empathy for those people. And finally, the third quality, appreciative. Sri is a dear friend of NAPABA, I know that. But what I heard him talking about as he went through his confirmation process is how critical NAPABA was to him. He really appreciated and understood. He doesn't have to be here tonight. He's on the D.C. Circuit, the second most powerful court in the land. And hopefully he'll get one more nomination, but I won't say that. But he is someone that truly appreciated everything that NAPABA has done for him. And I heard that, how critical it was to have people like Vincent and John and Tina talk him through every step of the way. He is someone that really appreciates this organization. He's a great human being, a great American, and I introduce Srinivasan.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you very much to my good friend Amul for that very kind and flattering introduction. I believe Amul may be trying to make up for the fact that he didn't set enough screens for me today when we played basketball. I haven't looked past that, but I do appreciate the kind words. It's so wonderful to be here with all of you this evening for this event in what's essentially my hometown. It's such distinguished company, a small, intimate gathering of 1,200 of you. I thank NAPABA for hosting this event and for inviting me to address you tonight. I was asked tonight to give some remarks related to the theme of this year's convention, which of course, fittingly, as everyone here knows, is momentum. I gather that the theme was chosen in part because the word momentum begins with MO, which is also the abbreviation for Missouri, the site of the convention. So the catchword momentum combines a celebratory sentiment about the status of Asian Pacific Americans in the legal profession, perfectly in keeping with the mission of NAPABA, together with a reference to the place where the celebration is being held here in Missouri. Clever. I like it. With that pattern in mind, I applied my business school training and came up with some suggestions for catchphrases for upcoming conventions that might marry well with this year's, perhaps creating a series of sorts beginning with this year's We Got Momentum. So in 2 years, the convention is being held in New Orleans, as I understand it. New Orleans is N-O, or no. So perhaps something subtle like, no stopping us, don't even try. We have too much momentum. I believe next year's convention is being held in Scottsdale, Arizona. Arizona's abbreviation is AZ, or AS. I don't know much that can be done with the words beginning with as, like azalea or azoth, which, as everyone here knows, of course, means mercury, considered in alchemy to be the primary source of all metals. But in the self-celebratory spirit captured by momentum this year, and no stopping us in 2 years, and I think it's appropriate for me to say this in this company, perhaps something could be done along the following lines. We are kicking ass. We have momentum. No stopping us, or something like that. Just a thought for the convention planner's consideration. But before jumping ahead to future conventions, let's focus on this year's theme of momentum. Does anyone here know what the concept of momentum in fact means? I must say, I highly doubt it. Momentum, of course, is a scientific term in physics. And you have no idea what it actually means because you, like me, are the disappointing Asian Pacific Americans who cannot cut it in the hard sciences. That's why we went with Plan B or C in law. You don't know what momentum means any more than you know what azoth means. Mercury considered in alchemy to be the primary source of all metals. So let me tell you what momentum means. I looked it up. And what I found out is that momentum is a measure of the strength of force of an object when it's moving. It's formally defined as the product of mass and velocity, which makes perfect sense. The bigger the object, that is, the greater its mass, and the faster it's moving, that is, the higher its velocity, the greater its momentum. So it is with Asian Pacific Americans in the law in this country. There is momentum. That in turn is because there's a greater mass in terms of the number of Asian Pacific Americans making notable contributions in the law, many of whom are in this room. And there's also greater velocity in the sense that the pace with which those contributions are being made is steadily increasing. Mass times velocity equals momentum. We see recent evidence of this community's momentum in this country, not just in law, but in society generally. Asian Pacific Americans are making their mark and gaining acceptance, recognition, and influence in a great many walks of American life. So it's perhaps unsurprising that the same is occurring in the law. And what seems especially notable about some of these recent indicia is that they involve uniquely American spheres. We could start with sports, as I often like to do, and the National Basketball Association. Jeremy Lin, of course, last year became a stirring sensation in the NBA and in the national sports consciousness more generally. Linsanity became so fashionable that Spike Lee, himself a courtside sitting fixture of a basketball institution within the basketball institution that's Madison Square Garden, wore Lin's high school jersey courtside at a game. The second highest selling NBA jersey in the country last year was Jeremy Lin's. Not second highest selling abroad or in Asia, the second highest selling in this country. We've seen similar developments in the entertainment sector in this country. Last year, the runner-up in a true representation of Americana, the popular singing show aptly named American Idol, was an Asian American, Jessica Sanchez. My kids love her. Just to put the apparent significance of that selection to Americans in some perspective, last season was the same year as the presidential election. 129 million votes were cast in the presidential election. 132 million votes were cast in the election to pick the winner of American Idol. The upshot is that Jessica Sanchez may have received roughly the same number of raw votes as the president himself. That's not to say that Jessica Sanchez should have run for president. She couldn't. You're all lawyers. You know why. She was constitutionally ineligible because at 16, she was less than half the minimum age. But the upshot is that an Asian Pacific American, although not the American president, came as close as one could be to becoming the American Idol. She was one-up this year on a similar and similarly American show, which my kids also love, entitled America's Got Talent. The overall winner was Kenichi Abina, a dance performer who was born in Japan. His dance merged American cultural elements with those of his home country. Watch the videos, they are truly amazing. And the result was that American voters determined that the winner of America's Got Talent is someone of Asian heritage, whose heritage formed an integral part of his performances. Finally, in that most quintessential of American competitions, Miss America, the winner this year was an Asian Pacific American. Not only that, but the first runner-up was an Asian Pacific American, as was also the fourth runner-up. Think about that. In the competition to determine Miss America, not Miss Asian America, not Miss International America, Miss America, the winner this year and 3 of the top 5 finishers are of Asian heritage. Spelling bees, math competitions, those are one thing. And success in those arenas has become very, very familiar to us. But Miss America, America's Got Talent, American Idol, whatever one might think about these competitions and arenas, there's little doubting that the results quite visibly manifest momentum for the community in this country. So too in the law. What are the conditions that make this momentum possible? 2 of the central ones are, first, opening the doors of the country in a meaningful measure to Asian immigrants, and second, the wonderful possibilities that this country then affords to those who are here, especially including immigrants. It was not always so. Initially, of course, as everyone here knows, Asians faced a number of exclusionary policies and laws that largely limited their ability to be here, and therefore to realize the many amazing opportunities here. The Chinese exclusion laws, the court decisions upholding those laws are a reflection of that, as are the Supreme Court's decisions in Ozawa versus the United States and United States versus Bhagat Singh Thind, which upheld federal laws barring naturalization by Japanese and Indian immigrants, respectively. For those who were here, this nation afforded certain constitutional protections, and so it was held in the Supreme Court's Won Kim Ark decision, Jim Ho knows that decision well, in 1898, that persons born in the United States, in that case a child born to Chinese citizens, are constitutionally entitled to American citizenship and its attendant rights and protections. Still, though, the doors of the nation remain largely closed to Asian immigration. The legal landscape for immigration from Asia changed considerably by the latter part of the 20th century. Of particular significance, the 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act ended rigid national origin quotas and substantially opened the doors to immigrants from Asia. That development was closely tied in spirit to the ongoing civil rights movement, which emphasized equality of treatment across nationality and race. Within the first 5 years after the 1965 Act, the number of Asian immigrants to the U.S. more than quadrupled. The upshot was that while in the 1950s only 6% of immigrants were Asian, by the 1990s, fully 31% of immigrants were Asian. As we've discussed, momentum varies with mass and velocity, and the influx of immigrants meant a dramatic increase in mass in terms of the number of individuals of Asian heritage who resided in the United States. Once we were here, this great country afforded us tremendous opportunities and possibilities, the immigrant dream come to fruition. What this country offers was very nicely captured recently by the then Indian ambassador to the United States, Nirupama Rao, at a reception which I attended. She put it this way, in turn quoting the activist Achama Chandrasekharan. What America offers to everybody is the freedom to be and the opportunity to become. The freedom to be and the opportunity to become. And this community has seized both that freedom and that opportunity in fields far and wide, including, notably for present purposes, the law. After the first generation of immigrants from Asia set the foundation and paved the way, subsequent generations and their families naturally have enjoyed a wider field of opportunities open to them. The daughters and sons of scientists and doctors may become scientists and doctors in their own right, like their parents, but they may also veer off course and choose a different path to become lawyers, to become senators, congresswomen, public officials in elected office, and as we've seen, performing artists and beauty show contestants as well. My own family is a reflection of that generational broadening of horizons. My father immigrated to the United States from the humblest of humblest origins, initially on a Fulbright, to study and teach mathematics. My parents' children, though, did not study math, or even engineering, medicine, or any of the sciences. Instead, the youngest of my younger two sisters went into the high-tech world, and the older of the two went into public service in the field of public health. I, of course, chose to study law. I think we were all very satisfied with our choices and extremely grateful that we were able to pursue our own paths. My youngest sister may be the most grateful of all. She was the 5th employee at Yahoo, and she's now retired. Her two older siblings, who unlike her went to graduate school, in my case twice, are not retired. I suppose I might be retired had I not made the incredibly insightful business decision to sell my initial allotment of Yahoo shares, every share that I owned, on the day of the IPO, in light of the dramatic increase in share value that first day. Brilliant foresight on my part, shrewd investment decision. Perhaps it's no wonder that, having received both a business degree and a law degree, law chose me. In the field I chose, the law, the past decade has seen monumental inroads and gains by Asian Americans. In the legal academy, the number of Asian Americans in law school faculty positions increased by 50% between 2001 and 2009. And some of the most prominent scholars of this era are from this community. And if one considers the incidence of Asian Americans who appear in the Supreme Court, an indicator admittedly of special interest to me, the rise is even more dramatic. In the entire time up to the year 2000, only a handful of arguments have been made by Asian lawyers. It's hard to come up with an exact figure, but it's likely somewhere around 5 and less than 10. But in the decade plus since 2000, more than 90 arguments have been made by Asian American lawyers in the Supreme Court, including 17 in the last term alone. We've also seen multiple Asian Pacific Americans become state solicitors general. One is now attorney general of the nation's largest state. Another, Neil Katyal, was recently the acting solicitor general of the United States, the nation's representative before the Supreme Court. The short of the matter is that we have come a very long way from the time when the participation of Asians in this country's legal system was primarily as subjects of the law, including in decisions such as Wong Kim Ark, to a time when, particularly of late, Asian Pacific Americans are leaders at the pinnacle of the profession. We've also become judges, which I know from my own personal experience has been a central part of the platform of this organization. The increasingly frequent bulletins from NAPABA notifying members of a new nominee to the bench offer stark confirmation of that. In the federal judiciary, for instance, the first Asian Pacific American judge was confirmed in 1960, and in the roughly 50 years from then until 2008, there were a total of some 19 Asian Pacific American Article III nominees confirmed. In the less than 5 years since, from 2009 until now, there have been 16 additional confirmations, almost the total of the prior 5 decades, with 4 additional individuals already nominated and waiting in the wings. Momentum. Organizations like this one recognize and honor that sort of momentum, including on occasions like this evening. But they also exist to play an integral role in bringing it about. Organizations like NAPABA bring together communities, and we gain tremendous strength in community. It is uplifting in times of triumph and achievement, and at least of equal importance, it is sustaining in times of challenge and hardship. Momentum and the progress it occasions ordinarily does not come about seamlessly, but only after meeting challenges and surmounting obstacles. That is when community and a communion of purpose are especially vital. I cannot tell you how grateful I feel to have experienced the support and pride of this community during my own nomination and confirmation process and since. Others in the room have experienced the very same thing, and what we would all readily say is that it is deeply, indescribably humbling, and it is uplifting and sustaining. So thank you to this organization and to countless individuals in this room. On that score, we of course have NAPABA for Asian Pacific Americans in the law. We also apparently have somewhat similar acronyms for some of the various chapters. I believe that the Louisiana organization is LAPABA. From my own experience, we also have NASABA for North American South Asians in the law, multiple ABAs. which got me to thinking, if some of us were to form an additional organization with a slightly narrower focus for lawyers whose common characteristics has more of a Scandinavian flavor, in the sense of a common affinity for a 1970s pop music by a certain Swedish quartet, Dancing Queen or Mamma Mia, anyone? Would that organization be called ABBA ABBA? Okay, that was a stretch, I'm sorry. I'll close with a story from my own experience as a lawyer that captures for me the pride we all should feel in being part of the legal system in this country. The judicial oath that I and others here have taken calls for solemnly swearing that we will, quote, administer justice without respect to persons and do equal right to the poor and to the rich, and will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon us under the Constitution and laws of the United States, close quote. An awesome and humbling responsibility, that of securing equal justice under the law. When I consider that responsibility, I think back to a conversation I had with a client immediately after presenting oral argument on his behalf in the Supreme Court a few years ago. The case was called Abu al-Hawa versus United States. My client was Salman Abu al-Hawa, an immigrant of Palestinian descent. He had been a drug user, but never a drug seller, yet he was convicted of multiple drug felonies that normally apply only to sellers. My law firm took on the case pro bono, and I argued to the Supreme Court that his crime was a misdemeanor, not a felony. That was significant to him for a host of reasons that attend felony status, including that if he was a felon, there was at least a risk that he could be deported and separated from his wife and his children. Because Salman was not in confinement, this was the very rare case in which a criminal defendant whose convictions are being considered by the court has an opportunity to attend firsthand the argument in his case. After I gave the argument, I walked out to the main hallway adjacent to the courtroom where I met Salman. We proceeded outside the front door on an absolutely picturesque day and stood at the base of the steps directly under the portico of the facade where there exists the inscription, equal justice under law. I then explained to Salman what I thought about the argument, the gist of which is that I was pleased that the court had seemed to understand and appreciate our position. I then explained to him that while we of course hope for the best, one can never be confident in predicting outcomes, and we were going to have to patiently wait for the court to issue its decision. After hearing me out, Salman responded, very matter-of-factly, we are going to win. I knew that predicting Supreme Court outcomes was hazardous business, and I also knew how much was at stake for him and his family. And I wanted to make sure that his and their expectations were appropriately managed. So I again sought to explain to him that while the court seemed to understand our views, we needed to wait for the court to issue its decision and avoid getting our hopes up in the face of that uncertainty. After hearing me out again, Salman again responded, again matter-of-factly, we are going to win. I believe I made one additional effort along the same lines, only to be met with the same response. We are going to win. At this point, I felt I'd exhausted my options, and I asked him, Salman, why are you so confident? And he said, speaking as one who had come here from elsewhere, because this is America. And what happens in this country is that you've been wronged in the law. You take your case all the way to the Supreme Court if you need to. And if you are right, justice will prevail in the end. It turns out he was right in his prediction. We found out several weeks later that we had won the case unanimously. A wonderful day for him and his family and all of us who worked on the case. But as I think about the role I've now assumed and the system of which we are all a part, I can't help but be moved by his unflinching faith in the legal system in this country and his unwavering confidence in the ability of the judiciary to render impartial justice to all. That vision, idealistic though it may be, is a deeply inspiring one to me. We are all greatly privileged to have an opportunity to play a role in that wonderfully essential enterprise. Our momentum is towards a highly noble purpose. We should be proud of that indeed. Thank you very much to NAPABA for inviting me to give you some remarks, and to all of you, have a wonderful evening.